Mike and Byron, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you guys' time. So, Millhouse, the group, right away, just tell me about it. For someone who's never heard of Millhouse, what's the concept of the group and what are you guys setting out to do right now?
We're a two-piece band with no vocals or instrumental. We both try to do as much as we can. So I do a lot of guitar looping, and I split my signal, and I can do bass parts too, while he does drums and plays synth at the same time.
Wow.
So, and overall goals, I guess, we're just trying to play as many shows as we can, get as many fans as we can, and just have a good time, really.
Okay, that sounds really cool. So, for the drums and synth, how do you manage to do that at the same time?
I'm a left-handed drummer, but I play on a right-handed kit. So I
Okay.
have like all my cymbals on one side, and then I have my synth for my right hand. So I basically like keep the beat with my left side, with my left hand,
Right.
and then I'll play synth with my right. We're trying to like get the biggest sound out of
Just the two of us.
just the two of us. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, what are the other two instruments that are played simultaneously again? Sorry.
So I play guitar, but I have a guitar looper, so I'll play something and loop it, and then I can do a thing on top of it, and then with just a bunch of different pedals, I can make my guitar sound like a bass as well, and then do bass lines over it. So it sounds like there's just four of me playing stuff, which is people seem to respond to that,
Wow.
and it's
Yeah.
like all live too. Like we don't play to a click or anything, so like every loop is kind of like on the fly. We've had shows where I've done it wrong, and then it kind of just sits there.
Sometimes it's like slightly off time.
We have to
You just
keep
play
correcting
slightly
ourselves.
off time.
Oh, right. Yeah. I know what you mean. I can picture that. Well, that's really interesting. So let me ask you this. This sounds like some really experimental, stuff that you guys have going on. This definitely isn't an orthodox approach, I guess you could call it. So when you
No,
first, yeah, so when you first started playing music, was it more of a traditional, like learning the rudiments, or did you start off experimental?
well, like me and Byron both have very different musical backgrounds.
I can
Like
imagine.
I
Yeah.
have right now we're in my like childhood home. And,
Okay.
like I practice on this
The
piano.
old piano, if you can
So
see.
Oh,
I'm
beautiful.
I'm trained classically on piano when I was a kid, and then I went to college and started listening to metal.
Okay. So
So
you started off with like the classical sort of standard approach, you would say.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
me on the hand, I kind of had the unorthodox approach. I started playing guitar when I was a kid, but like I never really learned any songs. I always just kind of took it and just did weird stuff, made weird sounds. I was in guitar lessons for a bit, but I didn't really like them because they were like I did all like the rudiments and the notes, and I'm just like that sucks. Like I just want to make cool sounds and be loud. And then we met in college, and it was just a match made in heaven.
Okay, so and it seemed to sort of go more towards your side of it as the band formed. So when you first met together, was it experimental or was it a healthy blend of both?
We were trying to just like figure out kind of our sound. We were in a college band together with a few other people. It's kind of like emo, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
So kind of emo stuff, and then we all graduated from college, and we all moved away, and we were the only two that kind of decided to keep going.
And it kind of started like we didn't really intend for it to get as big as it's gotten. We lived together when we moved to Toronto, and we rehearsed in our living room. And we kind of just were making these songs just for fun, like in between just like work and blah blah blah. And eventually we got a show offer just from a guy that we mutually know, and we're like, well, I think we have enough songs to kind of see what happens. And we played our first show as MILHOUSE, and the crowd really responded to it. And we're like, shit, maybe we could, see where this goes and actually start putting more effort into this. And 2 years later, here we are.
Very cool. Where was this show?
It was
The Central.
the Central in
The
Toronto,
Central.
which actually it closed down. They took the whole block out. They're putting
Yeah.
condos in it, but it was a really
Oh.
cool space. They had like all these free arcade games, like a foosball table, cheap beer.
Right.
It was sort of like Toronto's like if like you're starting out, you play the Central. It was like they could do like any band could play there and just kind of play for friends. It was kind of like a DIY space almost, but
Gotcha.
yeah, it's gone now, which sucks.
Okay, that's interesting. So how have you guys noticed the music scene in Toronto grow and evolve since that point? You mentioned that they closed a good portion of it down. What's going on with it now?
Well, we're like places are closing down, but other places are popping up.
Okay.
So I think there's more places closing down than popping up, but there's still hope. Like the Baby G just opened up, and 2 years ago, and they're like crushing it. They're doing a really good job. So that
Awesome.
even though things are disappearing, things are always going to keep coming back.
Right. It's like a cockroach. Like you can't really kill it because there's always going to
No,
be that love for
no,
the art, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
As
What's
for the
the?
music
Go
scene
ahead.
as for the music scene in Toronto, well, like the one that we're directly involved in, it's a lot of art rock, like
Okay.
And a big push in like instrumental bands, which is
Right.
it's really cool to play a show with just every band and instrumental, because it's usually when you're an instrumental band and you play like a show with a lot of other like traditional like indie bands or just kind of rock bands, you always kind of stick out and people always kind of put you in this weird category of like, why aren't they singing or saying anything?
Yeah.
But when you're with like-minded people who are, it's all about like the riffs or the melodies, and you just make these huge instrumental pieces, like it's just, the shows are a lot more fun for us because everyone, you know.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. And you probably feel more connected as well. In a different sense. Um, so what's the main kind of music that's typically played by the groups in the Toronto music scene? Is it more metal dominated? Is it more sort of pop synth?
Well, that's the thing with Toronto. Like, there's a bit of everything, which is amazing about the city. How like they're like this the kind of scene that we are in and our friends' bands are sort of like I guess like a math rock, post rock scene that we're that's sort of bubbling up right now. But there's a huge indie scene. There's a huge kind of like experimental, like lo-fi hip hop scene. There's actually not that much metal out of Toronto. I found like
I think it's
there's
more Montreal's got like that's
Montreal
Montreal's
has
got
the
that
metal
under
scene,
their
or Hamilton too. There's a lot of metal shows in Hamilton, but yeah,
Mm.
there's maybe like 2 metal bars in Toronto that do like mainly metal shows. But yeah, it's
I think a big part of that is to do with the Humber Jazz program. So like
Right.
a lot of the artists that are pursuing a career that are at our level, a lot of them have come out from Humber,
Right.
and they're very
jazz kids.
they're jazz kids.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
so
that what they call them around there?
yeah, damn jazz kids.
That's funny. It kind of sounds like Edmonton from my observation because that's where I am right now, and it's a city where people ask about the music or comedy scene, and it's just such a melting pot. You can't really put your finger on one specific genre. It's sort of been broken down into a bunch of subcultures now. Do you think that
Yeah,
that's a big advantage for a scene?
I think it's cool. It makes each small scene like a community. Like
Yeah.
everyone's so supportive that we play with. And
Yeah.
everyone comes out to our shows. We go out to everyone else's shows. Like it's a really cool community.
Yeah, and it keeps things fresh too, because like you'll like it, and like nothing gets stale. It's not like all the bands are trying to do one specific thing. You can kind of take from each other's scene and kind of bring it into yours. Like it's kind of like a melting pot of all these little niche markets of bands, and I don't know. It's definitely good for the whole music scene in Toronto. It's definitely a blessing.
Definitely. Let me ask you guys this: how would you describe the term for your genre, math rock? Because I'm imagining that you guys probably get a lot of questions about that when you describe it.
Boop, boop, ba-do-do-do, ba-do-do-do-do, do-do-boom, do.
Yeah, like I mean, in layman terms, it's basically just like straight like we try to do a lot of interesting time signatures, a lot of like tempo changes, a lot of key changes. None of our songs have the traditional like verse, chorus, like bridge, outro. It's just kind of like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Like it just um, they all just progress like that, and just especially and just with being 2 of us, like we can do whatever we want. Like I don't
Yeah.
have another guitar to like stay in key with. Like I can literally jump around the scales. I can play anything at any time, and
a
just
lot of
as
a
long
lot of
as
freedom with it.
yeah. So but yeah, if anyone asks what math rock is, I usually just say just imagine a song playing in 7 time and then 5 time and then 7 time and then a lot slower and then a lot faster. Just
Something slightly off.
or like if my parents ask me, because it's hard to explain stuff to them, so I usually just say punk jazz. That's a
Right.
good way to put it.
Yeah, I find it helpful to have like shorthand explanation of things like that for older people. It's like when people ask what a podcast is, I'm like, it's just an online radio show. It's just the
Yeah,
shorthand
yeah.
explanation.
Exactly.
Very simple. Let me ask you about the name Millhouse. I'm curious about that because a lot of people probably think that's a Simpsons reference. Is it? Is it?
It is.
It is. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. That's
it
cool.
totally is, yeah.
Don't tell Fox.
You were just fans.
Huge fans, yeah. We had a bunch of names before we landed on it, but like, that's the problem when you're picking a band name. Like after 5 or 6 like ideas, like nothing really like it just kind of comes and goes, and like you like eventually just have to pick on one. Like we like, oh, like that's a good idea, like that's a good one, but I think it was Mike that actually brought MILHOUSE to it. We were watching The Simpsons at the time, and it stuck. We're like,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Like that was the first one in like a line of 20 names that actually was like, whoa, that should be it. We both love The Simpsons, and just it's a cool name. I don't know, and most people will pick that up anytime we say that. They're like, oh, Simpsons, and then it's like we get that connection with them. Like, oh, you're a big Simpson nerd. I'm a big Simpson nerd. Let's talk about that. Come to our show. We can talk about Simpsons.
Exactly.
But,
yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because it just came into my mind. I didn't want to lose it. But going back to the concept of the whole math rock and the genre, I think it's interesting. A lot of different bands and groups probably fall into that category and probably just wouldn't be familiar with the term. Let's go back to some of the pioneers of this. Are you guys fans of Rush at all? I'm sure a lot of people ask you that.
Oh yeah, OG
Okay.
math rock.
How did that influence you in your making of music?
I guess, well, yeah, because Rush, yeah, like you said, like they were kind of like the first. I mean, I'm not gonna say the first, but one of the biggest, earliest bands that were like playing in weird time signatures. And I remember like hearing it on the radio and trying to like tap my foot to it. I'm like, what are they doing there? Like, why is there like an extra note at the end of every bar or something? And
yeah, we that was when we were I think when we were listening to Rush when we were kids. We didn't we didn't put everything in boxes. So we just thought that was like such a unique.
It just sounded strange, and we didn't know why. And then I guess as we got a bit older and learned more about music, we now looking back at Rush, we're like, holy shit, these guys were doing like amazing things for the time. Because when like there weren't many bands doing what they were doing, and plus a lot of math rock bands kind of take from that, and they were kind of like the pioneers.
Yeah.
But yeah, and a lot of their songs like were instrumental too, which is a rare thing to see for back then. But yeah, big influence.
Right. Did it help that they were from Ontario as well?
Yeah, they used to play my mom's. They grew up around Don Mills, and my mom grew up in Don Mills, and they used to play they played her high school prom before they were big. And I would ask her, she's not a fan of that type of music at all. I was like, so how was it? And she's like, it's loud. It's so loud.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's accurate. That is a very accurate description. I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
Did you guys, what was it like for you guys in school? Were you very vocal about your love for music, or did you kind of just keep it to yourselves and make it an after-school activity?
Well, we were in a music program, and part of that program was making a portfolio for like ourselves as musicians, and we got special permission to like work on our band at the time. Oh. So we basically made like our band like a part of our school project for music, because we went to school for music and digital media.
Right.
So super open. And yeah, even in high school too, like we both had kind of high school bands, and even in high school, like there was always like the music kids would hang out together. So yeah, we were very open about it. It was, yeah.
Too open about it.
Too open about it. People were like, yeah, I understand
like
that was,
you play guitar.
Yeah, that was always me with the podcast. I always made it known. There's a lot of parallels to that, to the world of, having interviewed a lot of artists. I think those two worlds, they can be very similar. One thing that I am very curious about listening to your music is, who else do you listen to? We didn't really name specific groups.
I mean, Foles probably.
Okay.
MILHOUSE.
Yeah, they're a huge influence on my guitar playing, definitely.
And Russian Circles. They're like a metal, kind of like a metal band from Chicago.
Very cool.
They do the same, very similar stuff. Like they loop stuff. Their bassist plays like a synth, a bass, and like a foot synth, like that move.
There's like an organ basically for his feet, which is really cool to watch.
That's awesome.
And their guitarist loops, and like they're three people, but they make such a huge sound. And I was like, when I saw them live, I was like, this is what I want to do. Just like make as much sound as I can.
Yeah.
So that you guys have mentioned that a couple of times. You mentioned the loops. What are the main things that really help you beef up that sound? Because, and this is very Rush-esque. That's why I asked about Rush, because, they're the three-piece. They have such a huge sound. And you guys seem to be doing it not in a way that's ripping it off in any stretch, but you're doing it very originally. So that's why I'm drawn to it. So how do you do that?
Well, I mean,
gear.
A lot
Okay.
of gear. Like, cause that's a lot of people always say that when we load into bars, like we bring so much stuff.
Okay.
For just the two of us, like that is the catch. Like
they expect like 5 people coming on stage.
Yeah, exactly. We have so much, like, cause I need my own amp and a bass amp. I have this huge pedal board. I bring 2 guitars because I do a lot of alternate tunings, and it's just easier to have guitars to switch back and forth. And Mike has his synth, and he has like a Roland sample pad that he has some synth stuff on. So Yeah, people always see that and they think we're a bigger band, and then it's just two guys. So it's the catch.
Also, extra amps. Byron plays through a bass amp and a guitar amp.
Okay.
He splits his guitar signal, and then like on my little synth and my SPD, we like basically crank the sub, so it just like shakes the room.
Awesome.
And we just playing loud makes it seem a lot bigger too.
Yeah, that's super cool. I can only picture, shaking those little tiny places. Do you guys find it a struggle to keep the attention of the audiences in places like that? Because, I find that if you jack up the volume like that, it probably really helps to get their attention and have them drawn into the show.
Yeah, usually it's funny. Like we'll play it. Like yesterday we played Montreal, and it wasn't like there wasn't that many people, but people would just like kind of be like flies on the wall. They'd like
kind of wallflowers.
They just like spread to and just like stay on the wall. But like when you just hit them with a lot of sound, it kind of like brings them to like slowly stand closer and closer into like
especially once like we start doing the looping thing, or like as soon as they just see Mike playing synth, people are like, holy shit, how are they doing that? And usually people will come up and just sort of start watching us, which feels good when you're playing.
Yeah, that's awesome. In terms of promotion, you guys have been doing it for 2 years. What do you find is the most effective method of promotion for getting people out to your shows and listening to your music?
Word of mouth was, we didn't have, for the first year, we didn't have any social or like we just like talked to people and,
wow.
We just got show after show after show. And then after that, we're like, maybe we should kind of get some social
at this
media.
point you kind of have to, but in the beginning, all word of mouth. And it's really just, if any bands listening right now that are kind of working at or starting off, just make sure every show is your best, and once people see that, they'll ask you to come back.
Yeah.
Like even if you're starting out, like don't let the audience know that. You
Exactly.
You keep playing like it's your 50th, 100th show every time, and the audience will respond to that. Like if you get up there and act like you've been there before, people are like, whoa, and then they tell 2 friends and so on, and
it's like Kiss said back in the 70s, you act like it's the Garden every night.
Exactly. And so that was the beginning. And lately for promotion, we find that just sponsoring ads on Instagram works a lot too. You just throw like $4 at it, and then people say, and you have to have good content with that too. And as long as you're putting out good content, like good photos, we have a big team of people who are kind of working with us and making little videos for us and photos. And so like anything you post, as long as it's like eye-catching and interesting, not just like boring content, if you sponsor that, people respond to that a lot.
And also, Taylor, like Looters, who reached out to you guys, they've been helping. Like we just started working with them like the past like 2 months, and they've been really helpful, like pushing things and getting us on. We just got charted. On Western University Radio.
Good for you guys! Congrats.
Yeah, which is cool.
That was a nice email to read.
Cool. That's really cool. Yeah, Looters is fantastic. A huge shout out to them. We love them here at the show. And we do thank them for connecting us with you guys. I really appreciate you guys' time today. And, of course, I'll encourage everybody to go check you guys out. Instagram at MILHOUSE Toronto, Facebook.com/MILHOUSE Toronto, and, of course, MILHOUSEToronto.bandcamp.com. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Safe travels. And, again, appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having us, man.
All right, thanks. Take care.